541 million years ago, the Paleozoic Ocean. Before the continents drifted into their familiar shapes, before the first forests breathed life into the atmosphere, and long before the first dinosaur let out a roar, the world was a silent, alien expanse of water. For eons, life was simple, microscopic, drifting, and largely defenseless. But then, something shifted. A biological spark ignited, triggering a phenomenon that would rewrite the rules of existence: the Cambrian Explosion. Imagine a world transitioning from a slow-motion dance of soft-bodied organisms into a frantic, high-stakes arms race. In this chaotic era, the blueprint for complexity was being drafted. Evolution was no longer playing it safe. It was experimenting with armor, with eyes, and with movement. It was a period of radical biological invention, where the first predators began to emerge from the silt, armed with the sudden, terrifying realization that they could hunt. But we are not looking for the heavy, armored trilobites or the grasping limbs of Anomalocaris. To find the true ancestors of the shark, we must look deeper into the cellular architecture of this era. We must look for the moment when a fundamental decision was made in the genetic code, a decision that would grant one lineage a permanent advantage in the sea. During the Cambrian, the foundations of the vertebrate body plan were being laid. The first primitive chordates appeared, possessing a notochord, a flexible, structural rod that allowed for a more efficient, rhythmic way of swimming. This was the breakthrough. This movement allowed organisms to move through the water column with purpose, rather than merely drifting with the currents. As these early chordates evolved, a divergence began to occur in the way they constructed their bodies. One path led toward the heavy, mineralized bone that would eventually define the fish of the modern world. But another path, a more subtle, more flexible path, was being carved out by the earliest cartilaginous ancestors. While bone is strong, it is also heavy and energetically expensive to produce. In the turbulent, experimental waters of the Cambrian, a different strategy emerged: the use of cartilage. This lightweight, resilient, and highly adaptable connective tissue offered a profound evolutionary advantage. It provided the structural integrity needed for predatory movement without the crushing weight of a calcified skeleton. It was a masterpiece of biological engineering, a framework that was light enough for agility, yet strong enough to support the muscle of a hunter. In these primordial depths, the very concept of the predator was being born. The Cambrian explosion provided the stage, the raw materials, and the evolutionary pressure required to transform simple organisms into complex, sentient hunters. We cannot yet see the sleek silhouettes of the sharks we know today. They are still mere ghosts in the fossil record, shadows of a biological revolution. But the seeds had been sown. The fundamental tools, the flexible spine, the predatory instinct, and the lightweight cartilaginous framework, were all being forged in the heat of this ancient explosion. The blueprint was set. The era of the cartilaginous lineage had begun. 420 million years ago, the Silurian-Devonian transition. The stage is set. The biological blueprints have been drafted, the cartilaginous framework is established, and the arms race of the Cambrian has long since settled into a rhythmic, predatory pulse. But if we were to dive into these ancient, sun-dappled waters, we would not find a great white, nor a hammerhead. We would not even find a creature that looks remotely like the sharks of our modern imagination. Instead, we would encounter something far more profound. We would meet the moment the ghost became a reality. We meet cladoslash. To look upon a cladoslash is to witness the first true prototype of the apex predator. It is the bridge between the experimental oddities of the early Paleozoic and the streamlined killing machines that would dominate the oceans for the next 400 million years. While its predecessors were often sluggish or strangely shaped, cladoslash represents a sudden, breathtaking leap in hydrodynamic sophistication. Its body is a masterclass in functional design. It is fusiform, tapered at both ends, shaped by the relentless pressure of the water to minimize drag. For the first time, we see a creature that doesn't just move through the water, it commands it. Its fins are not merely appendages for stability, but precision instruments for steering, allowing for the sudden, explosive bursts of speed required to intercept fleeing prey. But the true revolution lies in its architecture. Unlike the armored, heavy-bodied fish that shared its seas, Cladoslash is built for the hunt. Its skeleton, though still primitive, is a refined version of that lightweight cartilaginous blueprint we discussed. This lightness allows for a high power-to-weight ratio, turning the animal into a living torpedo. As we observe it, we see the emergence of a specialized toolkit. Its mouth is not a passive vacuum, but a weapon. The teeth of Cladoslash are small, sharp, and needle-like, designed not to crush bone, but to pierce and hold. These are the teeth of a specialist, a creature that has moved past the era of scavenging and into the era of active, tactical predation. It is a hunter that can strike, grip, and swallow, marking the definitive end of the era of the mere fish and the beginning of the era of the shark. Yet, for all its predatory prowess, Cladoslash is a creature of its time. Its eyes are large, built to capture the flickering light of the ancient shallows, and its gill slits are positioned in a way that suggests a life spent in constant, rhythmic motion. It is a beautiful, terrifying glimpse into a new way of living. In Cladoslash, the shark has finally arrived. It possesses the essential trifecta of shark evolution: a streamlined, hydrodynamic shape, a lightweight, cartilaginous skeleton, and a specialized predatory dentition. It is no longer an experimental precursor or a shadowy ancestor. It is a functional, breathing, hunting reality. It has claimed its place in the water column, and in doing so, it has signaled to the rest of the ocean that a new master has entered the fray. The blueprint has been tested, and it works. The lineage of the true sharks is no longer just a possibility, it is a dominant force. 400 million years ago, the Devonian period. The seas are teeming, a chaotic laboratory of biological experimentation. But as we look closer at the fundamental architecture of these rising predators, we encounter a profound evolutionary divergence. In these ancient waters, a silent war is being waged, not with teeth or fins, but with the very substance of life itself. On one side, we have the osteichthyes, the bony fish. On the other, the chondrichthyes, the cartilaginous sharks. To the untrained eye, bone seems like the ultimate evolutionary prize. It is dense, it is hard, and it provides a rigid, unbreakable framework for a body. It offers the strength to support massive muscles and the structural integrity to withstand the crushing pressures of deep water. For much of the Devonian, it appeared that bone would be the standard, the indestructible foundation upon which all complex life would be built. But the sharks chose a different path. They chose cartilage. And in doing so, they made a gamble that would redefine the history of the planet. To understand why this was a masterstroke, we must look at the physics of the ocean. Water is heavy, and movement is expensive. For a predator like Cladoslash, every ounce of weight is an enemy. Bone is heavy, it is metabolically costly to produce and incredibly taxing to move. A skeleton of bone provides strength, yes, but it also provides inertia. It makes a creature deliberate, perhaps even sluggish. Cartilage, however, is a biological miracle of efficiency. It is lighter, more flexible, and significantly more resilient. By utilizing a skeleton of cartilage, sharks unlocked a level of agility that bony fish simply could not match. While the bony fish were anchored by their own density, the early sharks were becoming masters of maneuverability. They could turn on a dime, pivot with sudden, violent grace, and execute the kind of explosive, high-speed lunges that turn a hunt from a chase into a kill. But the advantage extends far beyond mere weight. There is a hidden, chemical elegance to cartilage. It is a living, dynamic tissue that is far more efficient to maintain in the nutrient-variable environments of the open ocean. Because it requires less calcium and phosphorus to construct than a full bony skeleton, sharks are not as tethered to the specific mineral concentrations of the seabed. This metabolic lightness granted them a budgetary advantage, allowing them to divert more energy away from building a frame and toward the two things that matter most for a predator: growth and reproduction. Furthermore, cartilage provides a unique kind of structural dampening. In the high-energy environments of the surf or the crushing depths of the abyss, a rigid bony skeleton is prone to fracture. A cartilaginous skeleton, however, possesses a natural elasticity. It can absorb the shock of a high-speed collision with prey or the immense pressure of a deep descent without snapping. The bony fish built fortresses, the sharks built spring-loaded machines. As the Devonian progressed, we see the results of this divergence. The bony lineages often became specialized, trapped by their own rigid structures into specific niches. But the sharks became the ultimate generalists. Their lightweight, flexible blueprint allowed them to drift, to dive, to sprint, and to adapt. They didn't just survive the limitations of their environment, they bypassed them. The era of bone was not an era of failure, but it was an era of specialization. The era of cartilage, however, was the era of the opportunist. And in the relentless game of evolutionary survival, the opportunist is the one who eventually inherits the world. 400 million years ago, the Devonian period. The oceans are no longer just a battlefield of physical strength, they have become a theater of information. While the cartilaginous blueprint granted sharks the agility to move through the water with unprecedented grace, a new problem emerged. In the vast, often murky expanse of the prehistoric sea, movement alone was not enough. To be an apex predator, you do not just need to be fast, you need to be aware. You need to know where your prey is hiding, where it is heading, and, most crucially, where it is located, even when it is invisible to the eye. Vision is a fickle tool in the ocean. Light is absorbed by the water, swallowed by the silt, and extinguished by the crushing darkness of the depths. Smell is powerful, but it is directional and slow, relying on the drift of currents. To truly dominate, the early shark lineages needed a way to perceive the world that did not rely on light or scent. They needed to sense the very fabric of the ocean itself. And so, one of the most sophisticated sensory breakthroughs in the history of life began to take shape: the Ampullae of Lorenzini. Imagine, for a moment, the ocean not as a volume of water, but as a massive, invisible grid of electrical energy. Every living thing, every pulsing muscle of a trilobite, every rhythmic heartbeat of a primitive bony fish generates a faint, biological electric field. This is the language of life, a silent hum that permeates the sea. To most creatures, this hum is undetectable. To the evolving shark, it became a roadmap. The evolution of these sensory organs was a masterpiece of biological engineering. It began with microscopic pores, likely derived from the sensitive tissues of the snout, which gradually deepened into a network of jelly-filled canals. These canals lead to highly specialized, bulbous endings called ampullae. The jelly within these canals is a conductive fluid, a biological electrolyte that acts as a bridge, funneling minute electrical fluctuations from the external environment directly to the shark's nervous system. This was more than just an improvement on sight or smell. It was the acquisition of a sixth sense. With the Ampullae of Lorenzini, the shark's world transformed. The darkness of the deep was no longer a barrier. The silt-choked waters of the Devonian reefs were no longer an obstacle. By detecting the infinitesimal voltage changes caused by the muscle contractions of prey, a shark could see a target buried beneath the sand or track a fleeing fish through a cloud of sediment. It could sense the bioelectric signature of a predator before a single fin broke the surface. This sensory revolution provided the perfect synergy with their cartilaginous frames. If cartilage provided the engine of the shark, the speed, the agility, the lightness, then the ampullae of Lorenzini provided the radar. It allowed them to process information with a precision that their bony competitors could not hope to match. As the Devonian progressed, this electrical awareness turned the shark from a mere scavenger into a calculated, surgical hunter. They were no longer just reacting to the world, they were reading it. The silent war of the Devonian was being won, not just by the fastest or the strongest, but by the most perceptive. The sharks had unlocked the hidden frequency of life itself. 252 million years ago, the end of the Permian period. The planet is screaming. For millions of years, the sensory advantages we have just discussed, the lightning-fast reflexes of a cartilaginous frame and the invisible radar of the Ampullae of Lorenzini, had allowed sharks to climb the ladder of dominance. But even the most sophisticated biological machines are not immune to the wrath of a planet in collapse. What follows is the most harrowing chapter in the history of Earth, the Permian-Triassic extinction event. Often called the Great Dying, it was not merely a bad season or a localized disaster. It was a near-total biological reset. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia unleashed a cataclysmic cocktail of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The greenhouse effect went into overdrive, skyrocketing global temperatures and turning the oceans into stagnant, suffocating graveyards. As the heat intensified, the oceans underwent a terrifying transformation. Oxygen levels plummeted, a process known as ocean anoxia, turning vast stretches of the sea into dead zones where life simply ceased to breathe. The chemistry of the water shifted. Acidification began to dissolve the very shells and skeletons of the creatures that once thrived in the sunlit shallows. It was a world of darkness, heat, and silence. In this era of mass death, roughly 96% of all marine species vanished. The great reef builders crumbled. The massive, armored placoderms and the diverse lineages of bony fish that had once competed for dominance were systematically erased from the fossil record. The ocean was becoming a tomb. And yet, amidst this global liquidation of life, the sharks remained. How did they endure when almost everything else failed? The answer lies in the very blueprints we have tracked since the Cambrian. While the heavy, energy-intensive skeletons of many bony fish became a liability in an oxygen-starved ocean, the shark's cartilaginous frame remained an asset. Cartilage is lighter, more flexible, and requires less metabolic energy to maintain. In a world where food was scarce and oxygen was a luxury, the shark's efficiency was its salvation. Furthermore, their sensory revolution proved to be a survival mechanism of the highest order. As the oceans became murky and the food chain collapsed, the ability to detect the faint, dying electrical pulses of scavengers or rare prey through the silt, and the dark was the difference between starvation and survival. The sharks did not need a lush, oxygen-rich reef to find their next meal. They only needed to sense the heartbeat of life in a dying sea. They were the ultimate generalists. While many species were highly specialized to specific environments that no longer existed, the early shark lineages possessed a fundamental versatility. They could retreat to deeper, perhaps more stable waters, or adapt to the shifting chemistries of the coastal zones. They were built to endure. The Great Dying was a filter, a brutal evolutionary sieve that stripped away the complex and the specialized, leaving behind only the resilient. When the smoke finally cleared and the oceans began to breathe again, the world was unrecognizable. The old masters were gone, but emerging from the shadows of the extinction, leaner, faster, and more perceptive than ever before, were the survivors. The sharks had not just endured the apocalypse, they had passed through it, ready to inherit a new era. 250 million years ago, the dawn of the Triassic period. The waters are settling, the heat is receding, and the silence of the mass extinction is finally being broken by the rhythmic pulse of new life. But this is not a world of rebuilding. It is a world of reconstruction. The vacuum left by the Great Dying is immense, and the biological theater is empty, waiting for a new cast of characters to step onto the stage. The sharks that emerged from the darkness were not merely lucky survivors, they were the architects of a new kind of dominance. To understand how they would go on to conquer every corner of the globe, we must look past their teeth and their ferocity and look instead at the machine itself. We must examine the blueprint. The foundation of this machine is a masterpiece of evolutionary economy, the cartilaginous skeleton. While the bony fish of the future would invest massive amounts of metabolic energy into heavy, calcified bone, the shark doubled down on the efficiency of cartilage. This is more than just a lighter frame. It is a structural revolution. Cartilage is inherently more flexible, allowing for a degree of undulation and lateral movement that bones simply cannot replicate. This flexibility translates directly into hydrodynamic grace. It allows the shark to twist, turn, and bank with a fluid precision that makes them the ultimate pursuit predators. In the energy-scarce oceans of the early Triassic, this efficiency was a superpower. Every movement was optimized. Every calorie spent was a calorie earned. This skeletal lightness is paired with a revolutionary propulsion system. The shark's body is a study in streamlined perfection. Their fusiform shape, tapering at both the snout and the tail, minimizes drag, allowing them to slice through the water column with minimal resistance. This is supported by the placement of their fins. The pectoral fins act as hydrofoils, providing lift and steering, while the dorsal fin serves as a stabilizer, preventing the roll that would otherwise betray a predator's position. The caudal fin, or the tail, is the engine, a powerful, oscillating blade that drives them forward with relentless momentum. But a body that can move with such precision is useless without the ability to navigate a three-dimensional void. This is where the shark sensory suite moves from advanced to supernatural. We have seen the rise of the Ampullae of Lorenzini, those tiny, electroreceptive pores that turn the shark into a living, breathing magnetometer. But the blueprint is deeper. It includes a highly developed lateral line system, a series of fluid-filled canals that detect minute changes in water pressure and vibration. A shark can feel the wake of a fleeing fish from dozens of meters away, sensing the very displacement of the ocean itself. When you combine this sensory input with a jaw mechanism designed for continuous replacement, you arrive at a creature that is nearly impossible to out-evolve. The shark's jaw is not fused to its skull in the way a human's is. It is kinetic, capable of protrusion and expansion, allowing it to swallow prey much larger than its own mouth would suggest. And because their teeth are not anchored in bone, but rather seated in a conveyor belt system of connective tissue, they never truly lose their edge. They are a predator that is perpetually renewing its own weapons. This is the blueprint. It is a design of efficiency, sensitivity, and relentless renewal. It is a design that does not just seek to inhabit the ocean, but to master it. As the Triassic progresses, this blueprint will begin to diverge, splintering into 1,000 specialized variations, but the core principles will remain. The foundation is set. The era of the shark has truly begun. 245 million years ago, the Paleozoic ocean. The blueprint is established, the machine is primed, and the stage is set. But a blueprint is merely a potential. It is the environment that dictates how that potential is realized. As the Triassic period unfolds, the planet is undergoing a radical transformation. The supercontinent of Pangaea is a massive, singular landmass, creating vast, shallow epicontinental seas and intense climatic shifts that are beginning to fracture the once uniform oceans into a complex mosaic of habitats. For the sharks, this is the moment of the Great Divergence. They are no longer just survivors clinging to the edges of existence, they are innovators. The biological vacuum left by the Permian extinction is being filled not by a single dominant type, but by a spectacular explosion of specialization. This is the Triassic transition, a period where the fundamental shark design begins to splinter into 1,000 different ecological directions. As the seas warm and new coastlines emerge, we see the first true evidence of niche partitioning. No longer content to occupy a single role, sharks begin to divide the ocean by depth, diet, and hunting strategy. In the sun-drenched, nutrient-rich shallows of the tropical margins, we see the emergence of lineages that favor maneuverability over raw speed. These are the pioneers of the reef-like environments, developing more compact bodies and refined pectoral fins to navigate the complex, three-dimensional labyrinths of emerging carbonate platforms. Meanwhile, in the vast, open expanses of the Panthalassic, a different kind of evolution is taking hold. The need to traverse massive distances in search of patchily distributed food sources drives the selection for even more streamlined, high aspect ratio bodies. We see the early precursors of the pelagic specialists, creatures built for the long haul, optimizing their metabolic rates to sustain life in the blue desert of the open ocean. But perhaps the most profound shift is occurring in the toolkit of the predator itself. The one-size-fits-all tooth of the Paleozoic is being discarded. In its place, we see the dawn of dental specialization. Some lineages are developing serrated, blade-like teeth designed to shear through the tough hides of increasingly armored prey. Others are evolving crushing, pavement-like tooth plates, a radical adaptation for a life spent scavenging the seafloor or hunting hard-shelled mollusks. This is the beginning of the dental arms race, a divergence that will allow sharks to exploit every conceivable food source, from the microscopic to the massive. This transition is not without its challenges. The Triassic is a volatile era, marked by fluctuating oxygen levels and shifting sea levels. Yet, it is precisely this volatility that acts as an evolutionary catalyst. The instability of the environment forces rapid adaptation. Every time a sea level rises or a current shifts, a new barrier is created or a new corridor opens, isolating populations and driving the genetic drift that fuels speciation. The sharks of the Triassic are testing the limits of their own blueprint. They are learning that the same basic anatomy can be tuned to inhabit the crushing darkness of the deep or the turbulent energy of the coast. They are no longer just a single lineage of predators. They are becoming a diverse guild of specialists. The foundation was laid in the Paleozoic, but here, in the heat and chaos of the Triassic, the shark is learning how to truly conquer the diversity of the world. 175 million years ago, the Tethys Ocean. The fragmentation of Pangaea is no longer a slow geological whisper. It has become a thunderous roar of tectonic upheaval. As the supercontinent breaks apart, it spills vast, warm, nutrient-rich waters into the gaps, creating a sprawling network of epicontinental seas. This is the Jurassic, an era of lush, green continents and even more vibrant, crowded oceans. But for the sharks, this is not a time of undisputed reign. The ocean is no longer their exclusive domain. The Jurassic seas are a theater of intense competition, a high-stakes arena where the shark's streamlined blueprint must contend with a new, terrifying class of predators, the marine reptiles. To look upon the Jurassic Ocean is to witness a clash of biological philosophies. Emerging from the lineages of the Triassic are the ichthyosaurs, the undisputed masters of the open blue. They are the apex of convergent evolution, having transformed from lizard-like ancestors into creatures that look hauntingly like modern dolphins. With massive, tuna-shaped bodies and eyes the size of dinner plates, designed to hunt in the dim light of the deep, they possess a terrifying combination of speed and sensory acuity. In the open water, an ichthyosaur is a living torpedo, capable of outstripping almost any shark in a straight sprint. Simultaneously, the Jurassic waters are haunted by the long-necked shadows of the plesiosaurs. These are the tactical specialists of the shallows and the reef edges. With their elegant, serpentine necks and powerful, paddle-like limbs, they move with a ghostly, undulating grace. They are the ambush predators of the margins, able to strike with surgical precision, reaching into schools of fish with a speed that defies their seemingly cumbersome appearance. In this crowded ecosystem, the shark faces an existential crisis. How does a cartilaginous predator survive in a world dominated by bone-crushing reptilian jaws? The answer lies in the very thing that allowed them to survive the Permian extinction: adaptability. While the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs claim the roles of the high-speed pursuit predator and the tactical ambush hunter, the sharks respond with an unprecedented surge of niche specialization. They are not trying to outmuscle the reptiles, they are outmaneuvering them. We see the sharks retreating into the complexities of the environment. In the labyrinthine coral structures and rocky outcrops, the sharks refine their agility, developing maneuverable bodies that can turn on a dime, a feat the larger, more rigid reptiles struggle to match. While the ichthyosaurs dominate the pelagic highways, sharks are diversifying into the in-between spaces. More importantly, the dental arms race we witnessed in the Triassic has reached a fever pitch. To compete with the crushing bite of a marine reptile, certain shark lineages are doubling down on specialized weaponry. We see the early ancestors of the great macropredators developing increasingly robust, serrated teeth, capable of slicing through the thick, reptilian hides of their competitors. They are learning to hunt the very creatures that hunt them. The Jurassic is not a period of shark dominance, but it is a period of shark refinement. It is a crucible. By coexisting with the giants of the reptile age, sharks are being forced to master every corner of the ocean. They are learning to be faster, sharper, and more diverse. The reptiles may own the headlines of the Jurassic, but the sharks are mastering the mechanics of survival, ensuring that when the age of reptiles finally ends, they will be the ones left standing. 150 million years ago, the Tethys Ocean. The tension of the Jurassic is beginning to shift. While the great marine reptiles still command the headlines of the deep, a quiet, methodical revolution is occurring beneath the waves. It is a revolution not of scale, but of geometry. A specific lineage of sharks is beginning to undergo a transformation so profound, so radical, that it will eventually rewrite the rules of oceanic predation. This is the rise of the odontodontids. To understand the eventual terror of the megalodon, we must first look at the subtle, incremental shifts in the teeth of its ancestors. In the mid to late Jurassic, we see the emergence of sharks that are moving away from the generalized, needle-like teeth designed for grasping slippery fish. Instead, we see the first true experiments in cutting-edge morphology. The teeth of these early odontodontids are beginning to broaden. They are gaining a serrated edge, a microscopic saw designed not just to hold prey, but to shear through it. This is a pivotal moment in evolutionary history. For millions of years, the primary method of shark predation was to strike, puncture, and swallow. But the ododontid lineage is developing a new philosophy, the ability to dismantle. As we move into the early Cretaceous, the evolutionary blueprint becomes clearer. These sharks are no longer just competing with the ichthyosaurs for fish, they are beginning to target larger, more formidable prey. The serrations on their teeth are becoming more pronounced, more robust. This dental specialization allows them to tap into a massive, untapped food source, the thick-skinned, fatty marine mammals and large reptiles that are beginning to proliferate in the warming seas. But a weapon is only as effective as the hand, or in this case, the jaw that wields it. Alongside the sharpening of the teeth, we observe a fundamental restructuring of the shark's cranial anatomy. The jaw is becoming more massive, the muscular attachments more powerful. This is the beginning of the megadont strategy, the evolution of a crushing, slicing bite force that can shatter bone and rend flesh with terrifying efficiency. However, this rise is not a sudden explosion of size. It is a slow, agonizingly patient ascent. For tens of millions of years, the odontodontids exist in the shadow of the great Cretaceous predators. They are specialized, yes, but they are not yet the giants. They are refining their mechanics, perfecting the serration of their teeth, and optimizing their jaw leverage in a world where the mosasaurs are still the undisputed kings of the Cretaceous seas. They are playing the long game. While the mosasaurs represent a peak of reptilian power, their dominance is tied to the era of the dinosaur. The ododontid lineage, however, is building a biological toolkit designed for endurance and versatility. They are evolving a body plan that is both powerful and efficient, a dental kit that is both versatile and devastating, and a predatory instinct that favors the high-calorie rewards of large-bodied prey. The stage is being set. The evolutionary software is being written in the shallow seas of the Cretaceous. The odontodontids are quietly perfecting the mechanics of the ultimate apex predator. They are waiting for the great extinction event that will clear the stage, for the moment when the reptiles fall and the oceans are left vacant, waiting for a monster to claim them. The slow rise is nearly complete. The era of the giant is about to begin. 100 million years ago, the Western Interior Seaway. The era of the long game has collided with the reality of immediate, brutal dominance. As the Cretaceous period reaches its fever pitch, the oceans are no longer merely a theater for slow evolutionary refinement. They have become a battlefield. For millions of years, the ododontid sharks have been perfecting their serrated blades, preparing for a world of giants. But they have arrived to find that the throne is already occupied. Enter the mosasaurs. If the sharks are the scalpel of the Cretaceous, the mosasaurs are the sledgehammer. These are not mere reptiles. They are highly specialized, marine-adapted leviathans, descended from land-dwelling lizards that return to the sea with a vengeance. Unlike the sharks, who rely on the streamlined efficiency of cartilage, the mosasaurs possess the raw, explosive power of vertebrate bone and a metabolic drive that demands constant, high-calorie kills. The conflict between these two lineages is not just a fight for food. It is a clash of two fundamentally different biological philosophies. On one side, we have the shark, a masterpiece of hydrodynamic stealth. The odontodontids are masters of the ambush, utilizing their sensory arrays to detect the slightest electrical pulse of a heartbeat in the murky depths. They are built for endurance, capable of patrolling vast stretches of the ocean with minimal energy expenditure, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver a single, devastating, slicing strike. On the other side, we have the mosasaur, the heavy cavalry of the deep. With massive, serpentine bodies and powerful flippers, they move with a terrifying, rhythmic propulsion. Their jaws are not just tools for cutting, they are complex mechanisms featuring pterygoid teeth, a second set of teeth in the roof of the mouth designed to pull struggling prey down the throat. They do not just bite, they engulf. In the sun-drenched shallows and the crushing depths of the seaways, the encounters are legendary. We see the tactical struggle, a mosasaur, a massive predator like Tylosaurus, patrolling the upper water column, its keen eyes searching for movement. It is a creature of sheer intimidation. But beneath it, lurking in the shadows of the benthic zone, a large ododontid shark waits. When they meet, it is a collision of mechanics. The mosasaur utilizes its superior mass and sheer lunging speed to overwhelm. It seeks to crush and swallow whole. But the shark counters with its specialized geometry. A single, precise strike from a serrated ododontid tooth can bypass the mosasaur's thick skin, inflicting wounds that may not kill instantly, but will bleed the reptile dry and compromise its ability to hunt. It is a stalemate of titans. The mosasaurs hold the upper hand in terms of sheer size and immediate predatory dominance, reigning as the undisputed kings of the Cretaceous apex. They are the masters of the present, but the sharks are the masters of the future. While the mosasaurs invest their energy into massive, specialized bodies that require immense amounts of food to maintain, the sharks continue their quiet, methodical refinement. They are not fighting to win the Cretaceous, they are fighting to survive it. They are honing a toolkit of versatility, a blueprint of cartilage and serration that is more resilient to the shifting tides of history. The mosasaurs are the kings of an era. The sharks are the architects of an epic. 90 million years ago, the Tethys Ocean. If the mosasaurs are the sledgehammers of the Cretaceous, then the sharks are beginning to realize that a sledgehammer is only useful if you are trying to break one specific thing. To survive in an ocean teeming with an unprecedented explosion of life, the sharks must move beyond the one-size-fits-all approach of their ancestors. They are beginning to realize that to conquer the sea, they cannot simply be predators, they must become specialists. This is the dawn of morphological divergence. This is where the singular blueprint of the early shark begins to splinter into 1,000 different tactical directions. The evolutionary pressure is relentless. The oceans are no longer just filled with large, slow-moving prey. The seas are diversifying. There are now schools of fast, silvery teleost fish darting through coral labyrinths. There are soft-bodied cephalopods drifting in the currents. There are armored prey species with shells that defy the simple serrated edge. To eat them all, the shark must evolve more than just strength. It must evolve geometry. Look closely at the jawline. We are witnessing the birth of the specialized toolkit. In one corner of the ocean, a lineage is refining the slicer. These sharks are perfecting the narrow, blade-like tooth, a razor-sharp instrument designed to shear through the flesh of large, soft-bodied prey. Their jaws are built for lateral precision, allowing them to deliver a clean, surgical cut that can disable a target in a single, sweeping motion. This is the art of the wound. It is about blood loss and incapacitation. But in the darker, more cluttered environments of the reef and the seafloor, a different architecture is emerging. Here, we see the rise of the crusher. These sharks are moving away from the elegant blade and toward the robust, blunt cone. Their teeth are thick, heavy, and built to withstand immense vertical pressure. They are not looking to slice, they are looking to puncture and hold. These are the specialists of the hard shell, designed to crack the defenses of crustaceans and mollusks that would shatter the delicate teeth of their slicing cousins. And then there is the grasper. In the open water, where prey is often fast, slippery, and erratic, the evolutionary gamble shifts again. These sharks are developing needle-like, recurved teeth, small, sharp spikes that point backward toward the throat. These teeth are not meant for cutting or crushing, they are meant for entrapment. Once a fish is caught in this biological web, the more it struggles, the deeper the spikes sink. It is a mechanical trap, a one-way street leading straight to the stomach. This divergence is not merely a change in shape, it is a change in ecological destiny. By specializing, sharks are effectively partitioning the ocean. They are no longer competing for the same scraps of meat. One lineage claims the fast-moving pelagic schools, another claims the armored inhabitants of the benthos, another claims the delicate inhabitants of the reefs. They are carving out niches, building a complex web of predatory roles that will allow them to inhabit every corner of the globe. The era of the generalist is ending. The era of the specialist has begun. The sharks are no longer just surviving the Cretaceous, they are redesigning themselves to own it. 66 million years ago, the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary. For millions of years, the ocean has been a theater of escalating arms races. The sharks have perfected their geometry, the mosasaurs have mastered their power, and the marine reptiles have claimed the throne of the apex. The seas are heavy with life, a dense, complex, and magnificent machine of predation and survival. But in an instant, the machine is going to break. It begins not with a roar, but with a flash of light so blinding it defies description. A mountain of rock, traveling at 40 miles per second, slams into the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact is not just a collision, it is a planetary trauma. The kinetic energy released is equivalent to billions of Hiroshima-sized atomic bombs. The crust of the Earth buckles, sending shockwaves through the bedrock, and a wall of superheated debris is ejected into the atmosphere, encircling the globe. As the dust and soot settle, the world falls into a terrifying, suffocating darkness. The sun, the engine of all life, is choked out. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt. The primary producers, the phytoplankton upon which the entire marine food web is built, begin to die in staggering numbers. In the oceans, the catastrophe unfolds in waves of starvation. The great giants of the Cretaceous, the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, the massive, specialized sharks that had spent millions of years refining their ability to hunt specific, large-bodied prey, find themselves in an impossible position. They are the victims of their own success. They have become too large, too specialized, and too dependent on a high-energy food chain that is rapidly collapsing. As the phytoplankton vanish, the small fish vanish. As the small fish vanish, the giants begin to starve. The specialized slicers, the crushers, and the graspers that we have watched evolve with such surgical precision suddenly find their toolkits useless. There is no large, soft-bodied prey to slice. There are no armored crustaceans left to crush. There are no schools of fast fish to grasp. The complex, partitioned niches they worked so hard to inhabit are dissolving into a barren, watery wasteland. The extinction is a brutal filter. It is a selective pressure of unimaginable violence. In the depths, the great lineages of the Mesozoic are being systematically erased. The mosasaurs, the undisputed kings of the Cretaceous seas, are wiped out entirely. The massive, specialized lineages of sharks that had dominated the midwater columns face a precipitous decline, their numbers cratering as their prey disappears. For a moment in geological time, the ocean feels empty. The era of the giants is over. It is a near-total collapse of the predatory hierarchy. But as the smoke clears and the oceans begin the long, agonizing process of recovery, a silent truth emerges. The sharks, despite their losses, have not vanished. While the specialized giants fell, the survivors were those who could endure the lean years. The lineages that persisted were often the smaller, the more generalist, or those tucked away in the deep, dark refugia of the abyss, away from the immediate chaos of the surface. They were the ones who could survive on the scraps of a dying world. The KPG extinction was a reset button pressed with the force of a hammer. It destroyed the old world, but in the vacuum left behind, it cleared the stage. The specialized titans are gone, leaving behind an ocean that is wide open, hungry, and waiting for a new kind of master to rise. 66 million years ago, the dawn of the Paleozoic. The world is quiet. The thunder of the asteroid has faded into a ghostly, lingering silence, and the suffocating shroud of soot is finally beginning to lift. But the ocean that emerges from this darkness is a skeletal version of its former self. The grand, complex architecture of the Mesozoic seas, the intricate web of mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and specialized megapredators has been dismantled. The throne is vacant. The apex is gone. In biological terms, this is a vacuum. In ecological terms, it is an opportunity of a lifetime. For millions of years, the evolutionary trajectory of sharks had been a struggle for space. They had lived in the shadow of the marine reptiles, forced into specific, narrow niches, often playing second fiddle to the massive, warm-blooded hunters that dominated the surface waters. But now, the competition has been erased. The rules of the ocean have been rewritten by catastrophe. The survivors of the KPG extinction are not the giants that once ruled the waves, but the opportunists. They are the generalists. These are the sharks that possessed a crucial evolutionary trait: flexibility. They were the small-bodied hunters, the scavengers, and the deep-water dwellers who didn't rely on a single, specialized food source. They were the ones capable of eating almost anything, from detritus falling from the dying surface to the slow-moving organisms of the benthos. As the sunlight returns and the phytoplankton begin their slow, miraculous resurgence, the food web begins to rebuild from the bottom up. And as the small fish and cephalopods multiply to fill the void, the sharks are there, waiting. This is the moment of the great diversification. The vacuum left by the extinction of the marine reptiles acts like a gravitational pull, drawing the surviving shark lineages into every available corner of the globe. Without the mosasaurs to guard the shallows, the sharks move in. Without the plesiosaurs to patrol the midwater, the sharks expand. We begin to see a frantic, evolutionary explosion. The shark lineages that survived the darkness are no longer content to merely exist. They begin to specialize once again, but this time they are building on a different foundation. They are not just filling gaps, they are inventing new ways to live. The cartilaginous, the ground sharks, begin their ascent. These are the versatile, efficient hunters that will eventually become the most diverse group of sharks on the planet. They begin to radiate outward, testing new tooth shapes, new swimming speeds, and new hunting strategies. They are reclaiming the coastlines, the coral reefs, and the open blue. The ocean is no longer a theater of coexistence between reptiles and fish. It is becoming a shark-dominated empire. The reset button has been pressed, and the survivors are moving with a singular, evolutionary purpose: to occupy every niche, to conquer every depth, and to ensure that the lineage of the cartilaginous fish never again faces such a hollow silence. The age of the reptiles is a memory. The age of the shark has truly begun. 60 million years ago, the Tethys Sea and the warming tropical margins of the burgeoning Atlantic. While the giants of the past relied on sheer, overwhelming mass, the new masters of the ocean are playing a more sophisticated game. They are not just bigger, they are smarter, faster, and infinitely more adaptable. At the heart of this biological revolution is a single, formidable order: the cartilaginous. To the casual observer, a ground shark might appear unremarkable compared to the monstrous silhouettes of the Cretaceous. But beneath the surface, a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering is unfolding. The cartilaginous are the ultimate generalists, a lineage that has mastered the art of the all-terrain predator. They possess a modular biological design that allows them to pivot between roles with startling efficiency. Look closely at their anatomy. They have perfected a sleek, hydrodynamic profile that minimizes drag, allowing for sudden, explosive bursts of speed. Their teeth are not merely weapons, they are specialized tools. In the hands of a cartilaginous, a tooth can be a serrated saw for slicing through thick hide, or a needle-like dagger for snatching slippery teleost fish. This morphological plasticity is their greatest weapon. While the extinct giants were often locked into hyper-specialized lifestyles, becoming too dependent on specific prey or specific temperatures, the ground sharks are the masters of the pivot. As the continents drift and the ocean basins widen, the cartilaginous begin a relentless outward expansion. They are the pioneers of the New World Order. They move into the sun-drenched, complex labyrinths of emerging coral reefs, evolving subtle colorations to blend into the shifting shadows of the shallows. They move into the coastal estuaries, learning to navigate fluctuating salinities that would kill a more rigid predator. But they do not stop at the shoreline. The true genius of this lineage lies in its ability to occupy the middle ground of the ocean. They have claimed the epicontinental seas, the nutrient-rich shelves, and the transition zones where the land meets the deep. By dominating these high-productivity areas, they have secured a foothold in the most vital arteries of the global marine food web. This is not a conquest of brute force, but a conquest of presence. Through a process of rapid adaptive radiation, the cartilaginous are fracturing into hundreds of different species, each one a specialized answer to a specific environmental question. One lineage evolves to become a nocturnal ambush hunter, another becomes a high-speed pursuit predator, yet another settles into the role of a scavenger, cleaning the ocean floor. They are filling the ecological architecture of the planet, piece by piece, like architects rebuilding a fallen cathedral. They are the glue holding the new marine ecosystems together. As they spread, they are not just inhabiting the ocean, they are defining it. The cartilaginous are no longer just survivors of a mass extinction, they are the architects of a new biological hegemony. They have turned the chaos of a post-apocalyptic ocean into a structured, thriving, and shark-dominated empire. The blueprint for the modern ocean is being written in their wake, and it is a blueprint of relentless, versatile, and enduring success. 50 million years ago, the bathypelagic depths, thousands of meters beneath the sunlit surface of the expanding Atlantic and Indian Oceans. As the cartilaginous mastered the sun-drenched shallows, a new, more daunting frontier beckoned. To the surface dwellers, the ocean is a world of color, warmth, and light. But beneath the thermocline lies a realm of crushing pressure, eternal darkness, and a cold so profound it feels like a physical weight. This is the midnight zone, the bathypelagic realm, a place where the very concept of vision becomes a liability, and where the biological rules of the surface are rendered obsolete. For most life forms, this abyss is a graveyard. But for a specialized branch of the shark lineage, it is a sanctuary of untapped potential. The colonization of the deep sea was not a sudden leap, but a slow, agonizing descent, a multi-million-year evolutionary siege against the extremes of the abyss. To survive here, the standard shark blueprint had to be fundamentally rewritten. The first challenge was the light. In a world where photons are a rarity, the bright, reactive eyes of a reef predator are useless. Evolution responded with a radical shift in sensory priority. The Ampullae of Lorenzini, those microscopic, jelly-filled pores used to detect electrical fields, did not just refine, they exploded in complexity. In the deep, the shark no longer sees with light, it sees with the heartbeat of its prey. It senses the minute muscular contractions of a single shrimp, the electrical signature of a dying squid, drifting through the void like a beacon in a dark room. Then there is the matter of metabolic economy. In the deep, food is not a constant. It is a rare, unpredictable gift falling from the world above in the form of marine snow. To thrive, deep-sea sharks had to abandon the high-octane, high-energy lifestyles of their cousins in the shallows. They evolved into the ultimate masters of patience. Their bodies became soft, flabby, and lightweight, not out of weakness, but as a brilliant adaptation to pressure and energy conservation. By reducing bone density and opting for even more fluid, cartilaginous structures, they achieved a state of neutral buoyancy that allows them to drift through the water column with almost zero caloric expenditure. They became ghosts. Morphologically, they diverged into forms that defy the logic of the sunlit world. Some evolved massive, cavernous jaws and distensible stomachs, allowing them to swallow prey much larger than themselves, a necessary gamble in a world where you may only eat once a month. Others adopted strange, bioluminescent mimicking patterns or skin textures that absorb what little light remains, rendering them invisible to the few predators that roam the dark. This descent into the abyss represents one of the most significant ecological expansions in the history of cartilaginous fish. By colonizing the midnight zone, sharks did more than just find a new home. They bridged the gap between the surface and the seafloor. They became the vital link in the ocean's carbon cycle, moving nutrients across vertical layers of the sea that were previously disconnected. The deep-sea sharks are not merely survivors of the dark, they are its masters. They have turned the most hostile environment on Earth into a theater of specialized, quiet, and terrifyingly efficient evolution. While the giants of the Mesozoic ruled through presence, the sharks of the abyss rule through absence. The masters of a world where to be seen is to die, and to be felt is to hunt. 30 million years ago, the tropical belt of the Tethys Sea and the burgeoning Indo-Pacific. While one lineage of sharks descended into the crushing, silent weight of the abyss, another branch of the cartilaginous took a different, more vibrant path. They did not retreat into the dark, they moved toward the light. They sought the chaotic, high-energy, and hyper-competitive frontiers of the world's coral reefs. If the deep sea is a realm of patience and absence, the tropical reef is a realm of frantic, colorful, and unrelenting movement. Here, the ocean is not a void, but a labyrinth. It is a three-dimensional jungle of calcium carbonate, coral branches, and seagrass meadows, where every crevice is a fortress and every shadow is a potential threat. To colonize this environment, the shark blueprint could not remain a tool for open ocean cruising or deep-sea drifting. It had to become something more agile, more tactical, and infinitely more versatile. The evolution of the reef specialist began with a radical shift in maneuverability. In the open ocean, speed is a straight line. In the reef, speed is useless if you cannot turn. The sharks that thrived here evolved more compact, streamlined bodies and highly flexible pectoral fins, allowing them to navigate the tight, jagged corridors of the reef with surgical precision. They became the masters of the microenvironment, capable of darting into coral heads to strike at fleeing prey or hovering motionless in a patch of sunlight to ambush a passing fish. But the reef is also the most crowded neighborhood on Earth. To survive in such a high-density ecosystem, sharks had to evolve specialized hunting strategies that moved beyond mere brute force. We see the rise of the tactical hunter. Some species evolved to become nocturnal specialists, utilizing enhanced sensory arrays to hunt in the dim light of twilight, while others became masters of camouflage. Their skin textures and color patterns shifted, moving away from the countershading of the open ocean toward mottled, complex patterns that mimic the dappled light and shadows of the reef floor. This era also saw the emergence of dietary specialization. In the reef, the competition for food is fierce. To avoid direct conflict with other apex predators, sharks began to carve out highly specific niches. Some evolved narrow, elongated snouts to probe deep into coral crevices for crustaceans. Others developed specialized dentition designed to crush the hard shells of mollusks or the armored scales of reef fish. They stopped being generalists and became specialists, precision instruments of predation tailored to the specific menu of the tropics. Perhaps most importantly, the reef sharks evolved a complex social and ecological intelligence. They became integral components of a delicate biological balance. By patrolling the edges of the reef, they regulate the populations of smaller predators, preventing any single species from overgrazing the delicate coral architecture. They are the gardeners of the reef, the regulators of its chaotic abundance. As the continents drifted and the tropical belts expanded, these warm water specialists turned the most complex ecosystems on the planet into their own private laboratories of evolution. They proved that greatness does not always require the massive scale of a megalodon or the lonely endurance of a deep-sea dweller. Sometimes, true evolutionary mastery is found in the ability to dance through the shadows, to strike with precision, and to thrive within the beautiful, crowded madness of the sunlit world. But while the reef specialists were perfecting the art of the tactical strike in the sun-drenched tropics, a different, more brutal evolutionary challenge was unfolding at the opposite end of the thermometer. 15 million years ago, the shifting currents of the Southern Ocean, and the burgeoning icy frontiers of the high latitudes. As the global climate underwent profound fluctuations, the warm, predictable currents of the equatorial belts began to give way to a new, unforgiving reality: the rise of the poles. The expansion of polar ice caps and the intensification of cold water upwellings created vast, nutrient-rich, but biologically hostile territories. For most marine life, these freezing zones were absolute barriers, biological dead zones where the very chemistry of life seemed to freeze in place. To most, these waters were a tomb. But for a select few lineages of sharks, the poles represented something else: an untapped frontier of immense productivity. The challenge of the polar frontier was not just one of temperature, but of physics. In the near-freezing waters of the Antarctic and the Arctic, the metabolic cost of existence skyrockets. In these depths, the chemical reactions that drive muscle contraction, digestion, and nerve impulses slow to a crawl. For a standard shark, entering these waters would be akin to a sudden, paralyzing descent into a state of suspended animation. To colonize the poles, the shark blueprint had to undergo a radical physiological overhaul. The first breakthrough was the mastery of metabolic regulation. Unlike the reef sharks, who thrived on the constant, warm energy of the tropics, the polar pioneers had to become masters of efficiency. Some lineages evolved toward a slower, more deliberate pace of life, capable of enduring long periods of low activity when food was scarce. They became the marathon runners of the ice, built for endurance rather than the frantic bursts of speed seen in the coral labyrinths. However, the most profound evolutionary leap was found in the chemistry of their very blood. In the most extreme environments, certain shark lineages began to experiment with biological antifreeze. Through a process of natural selection, these pioneers developed high concentrations of urea and trimethylamine N-oxide, TMAO, within their tissues. These organic compounds act as molecular stabilizers, preventing the delicate proteins and membranes of their cells from being crushed or crystallized by the encroaching ice. They didn't just endure the cold, they chemically re-engineered themselves to exist within it. Yet, the polar environment also demanded a new kind of hunting strategy. While the tropics are characterized by competition through density, the poles are characterized by competition through scarcity and seasonal volatility. The polar sharks became opportunistic masters of the boom and bust cycle. They evolved to exploit the massive, seasonal explosions of life, the sudden blooms of krill, squid, and fish that follow the melting of the ice. They became the silent sentinels of the ice edge. Some species evolved to patrol the underside of ice floes, using the frozen landscape as cover to ambush prey from below. Others developed heightened sensitivity to the subtle vibrations of life moving through dense, heavy, cold water. In these frozen reaches, the shark proved that its lineage was not a slave to the warmth of the sun. By conquering the cold, they broke the final barrier, proving that the shark blueprint was not just a tropical marvel, but a global masterpiece of survival, capable of claiming even the most inhospitable corners of the Earth. 10 million years ago, the vast, open blue of the pelagic zones, far beyond the protection of the reefs and the shelter of the ice. While some lineages were learning to endure the stillness of the deep and the bite of the frost, another group of sharks was embarking on a pursuit that would redefine the very limits of aquatic biology. They were not looking for stability, they were looking for velocity. They were the architects of the lamnidae. To understand the rise of the lamnids, the lineage that would eventually produce the shortfin mako and the great white, one must understand the physics of the open ocean. In the vast, featureless expanse of the pelagic zone, there is nowhere to hide. There are no reefs to provide cover and no sea floors to offer an ambush. In this liquid desert, survival is not dictated by camouflage or patience, but by the ability to outrun, outmaneuver, and outlast. The evolutionary pressure was clear. If you cannot hide, you must be faster than anything else. The lamnid breakthrough began with a radical departure from the traditional shark body plan. Most sharks are ectothermic. Their body temperature is a slave to the surrounding water. But the ancestors of the mako and the great white began to pioneer a biological miracle: regional endothermy. Through a complex network of specialized blood vessels known as the reedy mirabile, the wonderful net, these sharks began to capture the heat generated by their own working muscles and redirect it back into their core. This was the spark that ignited a biological engine. By keeping their muscles, brain, and eyes warmer than the surrounding ocean, lamnid sharks broke the thermal shackles that limit almost all other fish. They could swim through cold currents without losing their agility. They could strike with explosive power while their prey was still sluggish from the chill. They became the high-performance machines of the sea. This thermal advantage fueled a morphological revolution. The lamnid body became a masterpiece of hydrodynamics. Their silhouettes streamlined into a torpedo-like shape, reducing drag to the absolute minimum. Their tails, the caudal fins, evolved into powerful, crescent-shaped blades, capable of driving the body forward with relentless, rhythmic force. They transitioned from the steady, undulating movement of their ancestors to a high-frequency, high-output propulsion system. As this engine grew more powerful, so did the lethality of the hunt. The short-fin mako, the pinnacle of this evolutionary trajectory, became the undisputed sprinter of the ocean, capable of breaching the surface in a violent display of kinetic energy. Meanwhile, the great white evolved into the ultimate tactical predator, a heavyweight powerhouse that combined incredible cruising endurance with the ability to deliver a single, devastating, high-speed strike. The rise of the lamnidae changed the hierarchy of the global ocean. They were no longer just participants in the ecosystem. They became the apex drivers of pelagic evolution. They turned the open ocean from a barren void into a high-speed arena of pursuit and evasion. In the race for survival, the lamnids didn't just join the competition. They redefined the very meaning of speed. Present day, the vibrant, kaleidoscopic labyrinth of the Indo-Pacific Coral Triangle. While the lamnid sharks were mastering the physics of speed in the featureless blue, a different kind of evolutionary genius was being forged in the shadows of the coral. If the open ocean was a high-speed arena of pursuit, the coral reef was a complex, three-dimensional puzzle of light, shadow, and suffocating proximity. Here, the rules of engagement changed entirely. In the reef, velocity is often a liability. If you swim too fast, you strike the jagged limestone or collide with the labyrinthine branches of staghorn coral. To survive the reef, a shark could not be a sprinter. It had to become a tactician. This drove the evolution of the small-scale hunters, the specialists of the shallows. As the Cenozoic era progressed, certain lineages of the cartilaginous began to pivot away from the pursuit-based lifestyle of their pelagic cousins. Instead, they leaned into the art of precision. This was the birth of the reef guardian archetype, predators designed not for the marathon, but for the surgical strike. The morphological shift was subtle but profound. To navigate the tight crevices and undulating topography of the reef, these sharks abandoned the long, streamlined torpedo shapes of the makos. Instead, they evolved more compact, maneuverable bodies. Their fins became more flexible, allowing for rapid, tight radius turns that would be impossible for a great white. They became the masters of the stop-and-go hunt, capable of hovering in place, pivoting on a dime, and darting into narrow gaps to snatch prey from the safety of the coral. But maneuverability was only half the battle. In the reef, visibility is a double-edged sword. The sun-dappled waters are bright, but the shadows are deep and deceptive. This pressured sharks to evolve advanced sensory and camouflage suites. We see the emergence of specialized coloration, countershading that blends them into the shifting light from above, and disruptive patterns that break up their silhouette against the chaotic backdrop of the reef. Perhaps most importantly, their hunting intelligence evolved. While a mako relies on kinetic energy to overwhelm its prey, the reef specialist relies on environmental manipulation. They learned to use the structure of the reef as an extension of their own bodies. They became ambush predators that could blend into the seabed and active hunters that could track the subtle chemical signatures of prey hidden deep within the coral matrix. Consider the blacktip reef shark. It is a masterpiece of this evolutionary niche. It does not seek the massive caloric payoff of a whale or a seal. Instead, it thrives on the constant, high-frequency opportunities provided by the reef's teeming biodiversity. It is a specialist in the microhunt, a predator that has traded the raw power of the deep for the exquisite control of the shallows. These sharks are the architects of reef stability. By patrolling the complex edges of the coral, they regulate the populations of smaller fish and crustaceans, preventing any single species from dominating the delicate equilibrium of the ecosystem. They are not just inhabitants of the reef, they are its regulators. Through millions of years of fine-tuning, they have proven that in the grand theater of evolution, sometimes the greatest power lies not in the strength of the blow, but in the precision of the strike. Present day, the vast, indigo expanse of the central Pacific Ocean. But if the coral reef is a complex, three-dimensional puzzle, then the open ocean, the pelagic zone, is a desert of infinite scale. Here, there are no limestone walls to hide behind. There is no jagged topography to provide cover. There is only the blue, a blue so profound, so featureless, that it can swallow a predator whole. In this realm, the evolutionary pressure shifts from the art of the surgical strike to the science of the endless journey. While the reef specialists perfected the art of staying put, the pelagic wanderers were forced to master the art of moving. To inhabit the open ocean is to live in a state of perpetual motion. In the vastness of the pelagic zone, food is not a constant. It is a series of fleeting, unpredictable pulses. A massive school of tuna might drift through 1,000 miles of empty water, only to vanish as quickly as they arrived. To survive such a landscape, certain shark lineages had to solve a fundamental biological problem. How do you fuel a body that must never stop moving? This necessity birthed the great marathoners of the sea. We see this most clearly in the evolution of the lamnid sharks, the mako, the shortfin mako, and the great white. These are not merely swimmers, they are biological engines. Their evolution was driven by the need for extreme metabolic efficiency and thermal mastery. Unlike the reef sharks, which thrive in the predictable warmth of the shallows, the pelagic wanderers had to conquer the thermal barriers of the deep. This led to one of the most remarkable evolutionary breakthroughs in cartilaginous history, regional endothermy. By developing a specialized heat exchange system called the reedy mirabile, these sharks can maintain a body temperature significantly higher than the surrounding water. This internal furnace allows their muscles to work harder, their brains to process information faster, and their digestive systems to function more efficiently in the cold, crushing depths of the migratory corridors. This thermal advantage is the key to their nomadic lifestyle. It allows them to bridge the gap between the tropical breeding grounds and the nutrient-rich, frigid feeding zones of the poles. They are the true global citizens of the ocean, traversing thousands of miles in a single season, guided by invisible maps written in the Earth's magnetic field. But the wanderer's life is not just about speed, it is about navigation. The pelagic environment offers no landmarks. To a shark in the mid-Atlantic, there is no north, no south, no up, and no down, only the relentless current. This pressure has pushed the evolution of their sensory suites to their absolute limit. Their Ampullae of Lorenzini, once used for detecting the heartbeat of a fish in a crevice, have become sophisticated compasses, capable of sensing the subtle electromagnetic signatures of the planet itself. Consider the blue shark. It is the quintessential wanderer. Lean, elegant, and almost ghostly in its blue hue, it spends much of its life in the blue desert, drifting through currents that span entire hemispheres. It does not seek the high-energy density of a reef, it seeks the efficiency of the glide. Its entire morphology is a testament to the economy of movement, a body designed to minimize drag and maximize the distance covered per calorie burned. In the grand narrative of shark evolution, if the reef specialists are the tacticians of the small scale, the pelagic wanderers are the explorers of the infinite. They have turned the greatest challenge of the open ocean, its emptiness, into their greatest advantage, proving that to conquer the world, one must first learn to move through it without end. Present day, the continental shelf of the South Pacific. If the pelagic zone is a desert of infinite blue, then the benthic zone is a world of shadows, silt, and heavy silence. As we descend from the sun-drenched surface and leave the nomadic wanderers behind, the very architecture of shark evolution undergoes a radical transformation. We are leaving the realm of the marathon runner and entering the domain of the ghost. Here, on the ocean floor, the evolutionary mandate is no longer about speed, distance, or thermal endurance. In the benthic realm, the most successful predators are not those that chase, but those that wait. To survive the crushing pressure and the low-light conditions of the seabed, sharks have abandoned the sleek, hydrodynamic silhouettes of the mako and the great white in favor of something far more sinister: the art of the stillness. This is the evolution of the ambush specialist. In the benthic environment, visibility is a luxury. The seafloor is a chaotic mosaic of sand, rubble, coral debris, and organic detritus. For a shark to move through this landscape is to risk detection. To be seen is to lose the meal. Consequently, the evolutionary pressure has favored a dramatic shift in morphology. We see the rise of flattened bodies, dorso-ventrally compressed profiles that allow these predators to hug the substrate, minimizing their silhouette against the seabed. But physical shape is only half of the equation. The true masterpiece of benthic evolution is camouflage. While the pelagic sharks evolved countershading, a dark back and a light belly to blend into the vertical water column, the bottom dwellers have mastered the art of texture and pattern. Consider the wobbegong. To the untrained eye, it is not a predator. It is merely a rug of seaweed and mottled flesh. Through millions of years of natural selection, these sharks have developed intricate, irregular skin patterns that mimic the exact visual frequency of the reef floor. They have evolved dermal flaps, fringe-like protrusions around their mouths, that break up their outline, blurring the line between animal and environment. They do not just hide in the shadows, they become the shadows. This mastery of concealment is inextricably linked to the evolution of ambush tactics. The benthic shark is a biological trap. They have traded the high-octane, aerobic metabolism of the open ocean for a specialized, low-energy existence. Their muscles are not built for the pursuit, but for the explosive, anaerobic burst. They can remain motionless for hours, their metabolic rate dropping to a near stasis, conserving every precious calorie while they wait for the unsuspecting to drift within range. When the moment arrives, the strike is not a chase, but an eruption. Using their specialized sensory suites, they detect the minute electrical disturbances of a passing ray or a resting crustacean through the sediment. In a fraction of a second, the stillness vanishes. The ambush is executed with such suddenness that the prey often has no time to register a threat. From the angel sharks, which lie buried beneath the sand like living ghosts, to the nurse sharks, which haunt the crevices of the continental slope, the benthic lineage represents a triumph of patience over power. They have proven that in the complex, cluttered landscape of the ocean floor, the most effective way to conquer your environment is to disappear into it. They are the masters of the unseen, the silent sentinels of the deep, waiting in the dark for the world to come to them. Present day, the Hadal Zone, the depths of the Mariana Trench. But if the benthic zone is a world of shadows and camouflage, there is a threshold even more profound. A boundary where the very concept of life, as we understand it, begins to fracture. As we descend past the midnight zone, past the crushing weight of the bathypelagic, we enter the realm of the extremophiles. Here, the sunlight is not just dim, it is a myth. The temperature hovers just above freezing, and the pressure is so immense, thousands of pounds per square inch, that it would instantly collapse the lungs of any surface-dwelling creature and shatter the bones of most vertebrates. Yet in this abyss, the lineage of the shark has not merely survived, it has specialized. To conquer the deep trenches, shark evolution had to rewrite its most fundamental biological rules. The sleek, muscular blueprints of the pelagic hunters are discarded here. In the deep, the cost of movement is too high. To swim with vigor is to invite starvation. Instead, we find the evolution of the economical predator. Deep-sea sharks, such as the elusive gulper sharks or the specialized etmopterids, have evolved bodies that prioritize efficiency over power. Their skeletons are often less dense, their musculature more gelatinous, allowing them to maintain neutral buoyancy without the constant, energy-draining effort of swimming. In this eternal darkness, the eyes of the shark undergo a radical transformation. For some, the evolution has moved toward massive, upward-facing ocular structures designed to catch the faintest trace of bioluminescent light drifting down from above. A single, ghostly photon becomes a beacon of opportunity. For others, the eyes have become secondary. In the trenches, the visual world has been replaced by a sensory landscape of vibration and electricity. The ampullae of Lorenzini, those delicate pores that detect bioelectric fields, become the shark's primary way of seeing. They do not look for a silhouette. They feel the heartbeat of a creature buried in the silt a dozen meters away. Perhaps the most staggering evolutionary feat, however, is the chemistry of survival. At these depths, the extreme pressure threatens to destabilize the very proteins and cell membranes that hold a living organism together. The extremophile sharks have evolved specialized piezolyte molecules, chemical stabilizers that prevent their cellular structures from being crushed. They have mastered a biochemistry that allows life to function under conditions that should, by all laws of biology, be impossible. Feeding in the abyss requires a different kind of hunger. Since prey is scarce, the evolutionary mandate is maximum yield, minimum effort. We see the emergence of disproportionately large jaws and highly distensible stomachs. A deep-sea shark cannot afford to be a picky eater. When a rare windfall of organic matter, a whale fall or a drifting carcass, descends into the trench, these sharks must be able to consume prey much larger than themselves. They have evolved to be opportunistic opportunists, capable of expanding their very anatomy to accommodate a feast that may not come again for months. They are the ghosts of the trenches. They are the architects of the impossible. In the most inhospitable reaches of our planet, the shark has proven that evolution does not just adapt to the environment, it colonizes the void. They are the ultimate testament to the resilience of the cartilaginous blueprint, a lineage that has found a way to turn the crushing weight of the world into a home. Present day, the tropical pelagic zone, the sun-drenched surface of the Indian Ocean. But as we ascend from the crushing, silent darkness of the trenches, the world undergoes a radical transformation. The pressure vanishes, replaced by the rhythmic pulse of the surface currents and the blinding, life-giving warmth of the sun. Here, the ocean is not a void of scarcity, but a vast, swirling soup of unimaginable abundance. And yet, in this realm of plenty, the shark has once again chosen a path of radical evolutionary departure. If the deep-sea sharks evolved to be masters of the minimum effort, a new lineage has emerged to master the maximum scale. To understand the whale shark, we must look past the predatory instinct of the bite and toward the biological miracle of the sieve. For hundreds of millions of years, the shark's jaw has been a weapon of precision, a tool designed to snap, tear, and crush. But in a profound evolutionary pivot, one branch of the shark lineage decided to abandon the hunt for the individual, opting instead to harvest the collective. This is the evolution of the filter feeder. It is a paradox of scale. The largest fish to ever inhabit our oceans has evolved to survive on the smallest organisms in the sea. The journey from a hunter to a harvester required a complete anatomical overhaul. The razor-sharp teeth of the ancestral shark, once the terror of the Mesozoic seas, were not lost, but rendered obsolete. In their place, the whale shark developed a specialized apparatus of gill rakers, thousands of tiny, comb-like structures that act as a biological mesh. The mechanics of this feeding are a marvel of hydrodynamic engineering. Rather than chasing a single, fleeing target, the whale shark utilizes a method of ram filtration. By swimming forward with a massive, cavernous mouth agape, it forces vast volumes of water through its specialized gill arches. The plankton, the krill, and the tiny larval fish are trapped against the fine mesh of the rakers, while the water itself is expelled through the slits. It is a process of constant, rhythmic processing, a living vacuum moving through the blue. This shift in strategy fundamentally changed the shark's relationship with energy. A great white shark is a high-performance engine, requiring massive caloric intake through high-intensity, high-stakes pursuits. But the whale shark is a biological harvester. By targeting the very base of the marine food web, the plankton, they have tapped into an energy source that is virtually inexhaustible. They do not need to outrun the fastest prey. They simply need to be in the right place when the ocean's currents concentrate the microscopic life into massive, drifting clouds. This specialization has allowed them to reach gargantuan proportions. Because their food source is so ubiquitous and requires so little metabolic cost to capture, there is no evolutionary ceiling to their size. They have become the gentle titans of the open ocean, moving through the water not as killers, but as nomadic giants, drifting through the currents like living islands. They represent a pinnacle of biological efficiency, the ability to bridge the gap between the microscopic and the monolithic. In the whale shark, we see that the shark lineage is not defined solely by the teeth that tear, but by the incredible versatility to redefine what it means to consume. They prove that in the grand theater of evolution, sometimes the greatest strength lies not in the power of the strike, but in the patience of the drift. Present day, the tropical pelagic zone, the sun-drenched surface of the Indian Ocean. But the ocean is not merely a collection of solitary giants drifting through the blue. If the whale shark represents the pinnacle of scale, then the true complexity of shark evolution is found in the intricate, often invisible threads that bind them to the rest of the marine world. To view a shark solely as a predator is to see only half the picture. To understand their true mastery of the modern ocean, we must look beyond the hunt and toward the dance of symbiosis. In the vibrant, high-stakes theater of the coral reef, survival is rarely a solo performance. Here, sharks have evolved to become the anchors of a sophisticated biological network. We see this most clearly in the relationship between the reef shark and the cleaner wrasse. In a world where every movement can trigger a lethal response, a profound truce has emerged. Small, brightly colored fish approach the shark's massive, intimidating silhouette, not with fear, but with purpose. They enter the predator's mouth, navigating the rows of serrated teeth to graze upon parasites, dead tissue, and bacteria. This is not a moment of vulnerability for the shark, but one of calculated cooperation. The shark receives a vital medical service, maintaining its health and preventing infection, while the cleaner receives a safe, nutrient-rich buffet that no other creature dares to touch. It is a biological contract written in the language of survival. The predator provides the sanctuary, and the cleaner provides the maintenance. Yet symbiosis is not always a mutual pact. Sometimes, it is a sophisticated form of exploitation that sharks have learned to navigate. Consider the remora, the suckerfish that clings to the flank of a cruising shark. Using a specialized dorsal fin that acts like a powerful vacuum cup, the remora hitches a ride on the apex predator. They gain two evolutionary advantages: a free ride through the currents, saving precious metabolic energy, and a bodyguard that deters other predators. In return, they often scavenge the scraps left behind by the shark's meals. It is a parasitic shadow, a hitchhiker that has mastered the art of living on the edge of greatness. Even more remarkable is the relationship between sharks and the very architecture of the reef. By patrolling the edges of these ecosystems, sharks act as the regulators of a delicate balance. Through a process known as trophic cascading, their presence dictates the behavior of every species beneath them. They do not just eat, they manage. By keeping mid-level predator populations in check, they prevent any single species from overgrazing the reef, indirectly ensuring the survival of the coral itself. This interconnectedness reveals a profound truth about shark evolution. The lineage has not just evolved to master the mechanics of the kill, but to integrate into the very fabric of the ocean's social and ecological structures. They have become more than just hunters, they are the coordinators of the sea. From the cleaning stations of the shallow reefs to the scavenging partnerships in the open blue, sharks have woven themselves into a complex web of life. They remind us that in the relentless pursuit of survival, the most successful organisms are not always those that stand alone, but those that know how to belong. 200 million years ago, the supercontinent of Pangaea. To understand why sharks occupy the specific corners of the map they do today, we must look beneath the waves and into the very foundations of the planet itself. While we have seen how sharks have mastered the social and ecological webs of the modern ocean, their physical distribution, the literal boundaries of their kingdoms, was not decided by biology alone, but by the violent, slow-motion shattering of the Earth. For millions of years, the world's oceans were vastly different. During the era of Pangaea, the coastlines were minimal. There were massive, singular oceans, but the vast majority of the Earth's landmass was fused into one colossal, unbroken shield. For the sharks of this era, the world was a landscape of vast, continuous stretches of deep water and relatively uniform environments. There were few barriers, few isolated pockets, and few specialized niches created by complex coastlines. But the engine of plate tectonics is relentless. As the internal heat of the Earth began to tear the supercontinent apart, the geological map of the world underwent a radical transformation. This was the Great Breakup. As Pangaea fractured, the land masses of what would become the Americas, Africa, Europe, and Antarctica began to drift away from one another. This was more than just a change in geography. It was an evolutionary explosion triggered by isolation. As the Atlantic Ocean began to unzip between the separating continents, it created a massive new corridor of high-energy currents and nutrient-rich waters. This new Atlantic Highway provided a playground for evolution, allowing lineages to migrate into entirely new territories. Simultaneously, as the Tethys Sea began to close and the Indian Ocean opened, the world was being carved into a mosaic of distinct maritime provinces. Think of the ocean not as a single pool, but as a series of rooms. Before the breakup, there was only one grand hall. As the continents drifted, walls were built. These walls were not made of stone, but of distance, temperature, and current. The widening of these oceanic gaps created evolutionary laboratories. When a population of sharks was separated from its kin by a newly formed ocean ridge or a widening sea, they were no longer part of a single, unified gene pool. They were trapped in a new reality. In the warming, shallow waters of the newly forming tropical belts, sharks evolved into specialized reef hunters. In the deep, widening basins of the nascent Pacific, others adapted to the crushing pressures of the open abyss. This tectonic chaos acted as a massive, planetary-scale engine of diversification. The fragmentation of the land created a fragmentation of the sea. By breaking the world apart, the Earth inadvertently provided the isolation necessary for speciation to thrive. It forced the shark lineage to stop being a monolith and to start becoming a spectrum. The cracks in the Earth's crust were, in a sense, the cracks through which new life poured. The very movements that reshaped our continents were the same forces that dictated the rise of the modern shark. A lineage of specialists, each carved by the unique geography of the ocean they called home. As the continents found their modern positions, the sharks had already claimed their thrones, shaped by the shifting, very ground beneath the sea. 65 million years ago, the widening Atlantic basin. As the dust of the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction settled and the supercontinent of Pangaea continued its slow, violent disintegration, a new protagonist emerged on the global stage: the Atlantic Ocean itself. This was no longer a stagnant, primordial sea. It was a newborn, high-energy corridor, a turbulent, rushing artery of saltwater cutting through the widening gap between the Americas and the African and European plates. For the sharks of this era, the Atlantic was not merely a body of water, it was a conveyor belt of life and death. The formation of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a colossal underwater mountain range birthed from volcanic fury, fundamentally altered the ocean's plumbing. This ridge didn't just create topography, it created verticality. It forced deep, nutrient-rich waters upward through upwelling, fueling massive blooms of plankton, which in turn fed the fish, which in turn fueled the rise of a new breed of apex predator. In this high-octane environment, the Atlantic corridor became a crucible for evolutionary innovation. The currents here were relentless, driven by the shifting positions of the continents and the complex thermal gradients of a world in transition. To survive in this corridor, sharks could no longer rely on the slow, methodical hunting styles of their ancestors. They had to become masters of kinetic energy. We see the emergence of specialized lineages that learn to ride these currents like oceanic highways. The ancestors of the lamniforms, the mackerel sharks, began to refine the art of regionalized high-speed cruising. In the churning waters of the Atlantic, the ability to maintain high metabolic rates became a premium survival trait. Evolution began to favor those who could not only withstand the turbulent, high-energy flows, but could harness them to travel vast distances in search of prey. The Atlantic corridor acted as a filter. It rewarded speed, endurance, and sensory precision. As the ocean widened, the thermal gradients became more pronounced. To the east and west, the currents carried different temperatures, creating distinct thermal corridors that acted as invisible fences. Sharks that could tolerate the cooler, nutrient-dense upwellings developed different physiological toolkits than those thriving in the warmer, more stable tropical currents flowing along the continental shelves. This was the era where the shark lineage truly began to fracture into specialized roles. The Atlantic became a laboratory for pelagic endurance. While some lineages retreated to the relatively calm, sheltered margins of the newly forming coastlines to evolve into tactical reef hunters, others leaned into the chaos of the open Atlantic. They became the wanderers, the long-distance athletes of the sea, developing the streamlined bodies and powerful tails necessary to navigate a world that was constantly in motion. The Atlantic was a gateway, a bridge, and a barrier all at once. It connected the disparate corners of a breaking world, yet its ferocious currents ensured that only the most adaptable could cross it. This corridor didn't just facilitate movement, it dictated the very tempo of evolution. By forcing sharks to contend with the sheer power of moving water and the shifting chemistry of a growing ocean, the Atlantic corridor sculpted the modern shark. A predator defined not just by its teeth, but by its ability to dance with the currents of a changing planet. Present day, the Coral Triangle, Southeast Asia. If the Atlantic was a high-speed corridor, then the Indo-Pacific is the ocean's beating heart, a sprawling, kaleidoscopic engine of biological complexity. As we move eastward, away from the turbulent, widening expanses of the Atlantic, we encounter a maritime landscape that operates on a completely different evolutionary logic. Here, in the convergence of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, lies the Coral Triangle, a labyrinthine archipelago of thousands of islands, shallow reefs, and intricate sea trenches that forms the most diverse marine ecosystem on the planet. In the Atlantic, evolution was driven by the sheer force of movement and the need for endurance. But in the Indo-Pacific, evolution has been driven by something far more intricate: complexity. The geological history of this region is a saga of collision and confinement. As tectonic plates danced and collided, they didn't just create islands, they created a massive, interconnected web of barriers and gateways. This constant shifting of seafloor topography created a species pump. During periods of rising sea levels, these islands were connected, allowing species to migrate and mix. But as waters receded, populations became trapped in isolated pockets, shallow lagoons, distinct reef systems, or secluded basins. This cycle of isolation and reconnection acted as an evolutionary centrifuge. It forced shark lineages to undergo rapid, hyper-specialized diversification. In the Atlantic, a shark might evolve to be fast. In the Coral Triangle, a shark evolves to be a specialist. Here, the reef guardians have reached their evolutionary zenith. Within the sun-drenched, hyper-competitive architecture of the coral reefs, we see the rise of the small-scale tactical hunters. These are the architects of the microniche. We see lineages like the requiem sharks, the cartilaginous, refining their bodies into living scalpels. They have evolved maneuverability over raw speed, developing compact, highly flexible frames that allow them to weave through the jagged labyrinths of coral. Their sensory systems have become tuned to the minute vibrations of a crowded, noisy ecosystem, where every crevice is a potential hiding place for prey. But the Indo-Pacific engine does not only power the small. The very complexity of the reef system provides a massive, reliable biomass that supports a staggering array of life. This abundance has allowed for a unique layering of predators. In these waters, we see a profound evolutionary stratification. You have the nocturnal hunters that have developed heightened electroreception to prowl the shadows of the reef, and the diurnal specialists that hunt in the blinding light of the shallows. Furthermore, the Indo-Pacific acts as a global nursery. The warm, nutrient-rich currents that swirl through this tropical engine provide the perfect thermal stability for the development of juvenile sharks. It is a sanctuary of high-density energy. This isn't just a habitat. It is a biological laboratory where the sheer number of interacting species has pushed shark evolution into a state of hyperspecialization. From the tiny, bottom-dwelling nurse sharks that have mastered the art of ambush in the sand, to the elegant reef sharks that patrol the edges of the drop-offs, the Indo-Pacific has sculpted a lineage of predators that are masters of the intricate. If the Atlantic taught sharks how to survive the journey, the Indo-Pacific taught them how to master the destination. This is the epicenter of shark diversity, a complex, swirling engine of life that continues to drive the evolutionary momentum of the entire ocean. 35 million years ago, the Southern Ocean, Antarctica. If the Indo-Pacific is the ocean's beating heart, a warm engine of hyperspecialized complexity, then the Southern Ocean is its frozen fortress, a realm of profound isolation and brutal, uncompromising simplicity. To understand the evolution of sharks in these waters, we must look not to the vibrant, sun-drenched reefs of the tropics, but to a geological catastrophe that fundamentally reconfigured the planet. For millions of years, Antarctica was not the ice-locked desert we recognize today. It was a bridge, a temperate link that allowed marine lineages to flow between the Pacific and the Atlantic. But as the continents drifted toward their modern positions, a tectonic curtain was drawn. The breakup of Gondwana led to the opening of the Drake Passage, creating a deepwater gateway between South America and the Antarctic Peninsula. This opening allowed for the birth of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, a relentless, swirling ring of water that circles the entire continent. This current became a biological wall. It acted as a thermal barrier, trapping freezing, nutrient-rich waters around the Antarctic landmass and effectively severing the Southern Ocean from the rest of the world's warmth. For the sharks of the North, the Antarctic became a forbidden zone. For the lineages caught on the wrong side of the current, it became an evolutionary crucible. While the sharks of the Coral Triangle were evolving toward complexity and niche specialization, the sharks of the Southern Ocean were forced into a different struggle, the struggle for thermal endurance. In this high-latitude isolation, the standard rules of shark biology were pushed to their absolute limits. Most sharks are ectothermic, their body temperatures dictated by the surrounding water. In the near-freezing depths of the Southern Ocean, such a limitation would be a death sentence, slowing metabolism to the point of paralysis. Yet evolution found a way. In these isolated, frigid waters, we see the emergence of the true extremophiles. Here, the evolutionary pressure wasn't about how to hunt in a crowded reef, but how to maintain the very machinery of life in a liquid freezer. We see the rise of specialized lineages that have mastered the art of antifreeze. Through the accumulation of urea in their tissues and the development of unique proteins, these sharks have achieved a chemical equilibrium that allows them to remain active where others would freeze solid. This isolation created a unique evolutionary trajectory. Because the Southern Ocean is cut off, there is less competition from the massive, fast-moving pelagic predators found in the tropics. This has allowed for a distinct, slower-paced ecological rhythm. The sharks here are often masters of energy conservation. They are the patient ghosts of the deep, evolved to survive in a world where meals are unpredictable and the environment is relentlessly hostile. The Southern Ocean barrier serves as a reminder that evolution is not always a climb toward complexity. Sometimes, it is a descent into specialization, a narrowing of the path to survive a singular, crushing reality. In the Indo-Pacific, sharks learn to master the many. In the Antarctic, they learn to master the one, the cold. They are the survivors of a closed system, a lineage defined not by the diversity of their neighbors, but by the terrifying resilience of their own biology. 5 million years ago, the Mediterranean basin. If the Southern Ocean is a frozen fortress of isolation, then the Mediterranean is a laboratory of volatility. To understand the evolutionary path of the sharks within this sea, we must move away from the concept of a vast, endless horizon and instead look at a world defined by boundaries, bottlenecks, and a radical, periodic transformation of the environment itself. For much of its history, the Mediterranean has not been a permanent fixture of the global ocean, but a restless, changing entity. It is a sea that has lived 1,000 lives. Throughout the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, the Mediterranean underwent a series of dramatic cycles. It has been a deep, thriving tropical paradise, and it has been a nearly desiccated salt desert. The most profound chapter in this story is the Messinian salinity crisis. Millions of years ago, tectonic shifts and falling sea levels choked off the connection between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean basin. The lifeline was severed. As the sun beat down on this enclosed sea, evaporation outpaced the inflow of water, causing the Mediterranean to shrink, collapse, and eventually transform into a series of hypersaline lakes and vast, salt-crusted basins. For most marine life, this was a mass extinction event, a biological apocalypse. But for the sharks, this period represented a brutal evolutionary filter. The Mediterranean paradox lies in this very struggle. How does a lineage evolve in a space that periodically disappears? When the sea vanished, the resident populations were crushed. When the Atlantic finally breached the Strait of Gibraltar, flooding the basin in the Zanclean flood, it didn't just refill the sea. It reset the evolutionary clock. It brought a fresh wave of Atlantic lineages, forcing them to compete with the few specialized survivors that had managed to endure the salt and the drought. This cycle of flood and famine created a unique evolutionary pressure. Unlike the stable, predictable ecosystems of the Indo-Pacific, the Mediterranean shark populations had to be masters of colonization and rapid adaptation. Evolution here did not favor the hyper-specialized giants of the open ocean, but rather the versatile, the resilient, and the opportunistic. We see this reflected in the modern Mediterranean assemblage. The sea is a crossroads, a melting pot where Atlantic wanderers meet specialized residents. The evolutionary trajectory here has favored species that can navigate a complex mosaic of habitats, from the deep, dark trenches of the Tyrrhenian Sea to the shallow, sun-drenched coasts of the Levant. In this enclosed theater, we observe a different kind of mastery. It is not the mastery of thermal endurance seen in the Antarctic, nor the mastery of niche complexity seen in the tropics. Instead, it is the mastery of the pivot. The sharks of the Mediterranean are the products of a high-stakes game of musical chairs, where the music, the very presence of the ocean itself, could stop at any moment. They are the survivors of a sea that refuses to stay the same. They remind us that evolution is not just a response to the environment, but a response to the instability of the environment. In the Mediterranean, the shark's blueprint was forged not in the calm of a steady sea, but in the chaos of a world that was constantly being born, dying, and reborn. Present day, the global ocean. If the Mediterranean is a laboratory of volatility, then the global ocean is a machine of motion. To understand why certain shark lineages conquered the planet while others remained trapped in local pockets, we must look beyond the water itself and toward the invisible rivers that carve through it, the great ocean currents. We often visualize the ocean as a vast, static blue expanse, but in reality, it is a world of high-speed corridors and impenetrable walls. These currents, driven by the rotation of the Earth and the relentless thermal engine of the Sun, act as the primary architects of shark evolution. They are the highways of the abyss, the conveyors of nutrients, and the ultimate arbiters of genetic destiny. Consider the great gyres, massive, swirling systems of circulating water that dominate the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. For many shark species, these gyres are both a sanctuary and a prison. A species caught within a subtropical gyre may find itself in a nutrient-poor desert, driving an evolutionary push toward extreme efficiency and specialized foraging. Conversely, the boundaries of these gyres act as invisible fences, separating populations and allowing for the slow, steady divergence of species. Through this process of geographic isolation, the currents do more than move water. They move the very boundaries of life, forcing lineages to adapt to the specific chemistry and temperature of the water they inhabit. But where the gyres are slow and circular, the major boundary currents, like the Gulf Stream or the Kuroshio, are the superhighways of the sea. These are narrow, intense ribbons of high-speed water that transport warmth from the equator toward the poles. For the great migratory sharks, such as the Lamnidae lineage, these currents are essential. They provide a low-energy means of long-distance travel, allowing predators to traverse thousands of miles of open ocean with minimal caloric expenditure. Evolution has sculpted the bodies of these highway travelers to be masterpieces of hydrodynamic efficiency. The sleek, torpedo-shaped bodies of the mako and the great white are not merely products of predation. They are the anatomical responses to a life lived within the flow. They have evolved to harness the kinetic energy of the ocean's pulse, turning the current from an obstacle into an asset. Yet the influence of oceanography is not always one of movement. Sometimes it is one of profound division. Upwelling zones, where deep, nutrient-rich water is forced upward to the surface by currents hitting continental shelves, create localized hotspots of biological explosion. These zones act as evolutionary magnets, drawing in diverse lineages and fostering intense competition and specialization. In these areas, the pressure to evolve is immense, as the sheer abundance of life demands new ways to hunt, to hide, and to thrive. Ultimately, the map of shark evolution is not written in the geography of the seafloor, but in the fluid dynamics of the water column. The currents dictate who meets whom, who survives the journey, and who becomes isolated enough to become something entirely new. The ocean is not just a habitat, it is a circulatory system. And the sharks, in their infinite adaptability, have evolved to be the ultimate navigators of its veins, riding the pulse of the planet to claim every corner of the blue. 1950, the North Atlantic. For hundreds of millions of years, the rhythm of the ocean was dictated by the slow, inexorable forces of geology and oceanography. The currents moved, the continents drifted, and the sharks evolved in a dance of deep time, responding to shifts that took millennia to unfold. But in the mid-20th century, a new force entered the water, one that does not move with the tides, but with the frantic, accelerating pulse of human industry. This is the era of the human shadow. As we transition from the natural dynamics of the ocean to the modern crisis, we must confront a hard truth. The evolutionary trajectory of sharks is no longer being shaped solely by survival of the fittest, but by the efficiency of the harvest. The industrialization of fishing has introduced a selective pressure unlike anything seen in the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, or even the Cenozoic. It is a pressure that operates not in millions of years, but in mere decades. The advent of long lining, bottom trawling, and massive purse seine nets has effectively turned the world's oceans into a landscape of unprecedented risk. For a lineage that has survived 5 mass extinctions, the primary threat is no longer a lack of prey or a changing climate, but the sheer scale of human extraction. We are witnessing a radical, forced restructuring of shark demographics. In the past, evolution favored the swift, the strong, and the cunning. Today, industrial fishing creates a different kind of selection. It targets the largest, the most fecund, and the most migratory, the very individuals that hold the genetic blueprint for the species' future. When we remove the apex predators, the top-down control of the ecosystem collapses. This creates a demographic vacuum, a thinning of the ranks that ripples through the entire food web. This is not merely a loss of numbers. It is a loss of complexity. As populations of large-bodied sharks plummet, we see a phenomenon known as size-selective mortality. Because sharks are slow-growing, late-maturing, and produce few offspring, they cannot outpace the rate of modern extraction. We are essentially stripping the ocean of its biological heritage faster than it can be replenished. The result is an evolutionary bottleneck of terrifying proportions. In many regions, we are seeing a shift in community composition, where the majestic, long-lived giants are being replaced by smaller, faster-breeding, less specialized species. This is a flattening of the ocean's evolutionary hierarchy. The specialized niches that took millions of years to perfect, the deep-sea ambushers, the high-speed pelagic wanderers, are being eroded, replaced by a more homogeneous, less stable biological reality. The shadow cast by human industry is long and dark. It obscures the natural path of descent, rerouting the future of the cartilaginous lineage toward a precarious crossroads. For the first time in history, the survival of these ancient predators does not depend on their ability to hunt or their ability to hide, but on our ability to stop the very machines that have turned their evolutionary journey into a race against extinction. The currents still flow, and the highways of the abyss remain, but the travelers are disappearing, leaving behind a silent, thinning blue. 2005, the Western Pacific. If industrial fishing is the shadow cast over the oceans, then the finning epidemic is the sharp, jagged blade that cuts through the very heart of shark evolution. To understand the gravity of this crisis, we must look past the sheer volume of the catch and examine the horrific mechanics of the practice itself. Finning is not merely fishing. It is a targeted surgical extraction of a species' most vital biological assets. In a matter of seconds, a shark, a predator that may have spent decades navigating the currents and mastering its niche, is caught, its fins are sliced away, and its lifeless body is discarded back into the abyss. This is not a hunt for sustenance. It is a harvest driven by a global demand for a luxury commodity. But the true tragedy of finning lies in its profound disruption of evolutionary stability. Evolution is a game of balance, a delicate equilibrium between birth rates, mortality, and the genetic traits passed from one generation to the next. Finning shatters this balance with surgical precision. Because the demand is specifically for the fins, the industry has created a perverse selective pressure. We are not just removing individuals, we are removing the most highly evolved members of the population. In the natural world, the largest sharks are often the most successful. They are the masters of their domains, possessing the most refined sensory systems and the most efficient metabolic processes. They are the genetic heavyweights. When we systematically target these individuals, we are engaging in a form of reverse evolution. We are performing a massive, forced genetic pruning, selecting against the very traits, size, strength, and longevity that allowed sharks to survive the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. The biological cost is catastrophic. Sharks are the ultimate victims of their own evolutionary success. Their strategy for survival has always been based on K-selection, a life history characterized by slow growth, late sexual maturity, and the production of very few but highly developed offspring. This strategy works perfectly in a world of natural predation and shifting climates, but it is a death sentence in the face of industrial finning. A great white or a hammerhead cannot reproduce fast enough to compensate for the loss of its breeding adults. Every fin removed represents a lost opportunity for the species to pass on its ancient, hard-won wisdom to the next generation. As these apex lineages are hollowed out, we witness the decomplexification of the ocean. When the top tier of the predator hierarchy is removed, the entire structural integrity of the marine ecosystem begins to fray. Without sharks to regulate prey populations, we see trophic cascades, uncontrolled surges in mid-level predators that can decimate seagrass beds, coral reefs, and fish stocks. The ocean is losing its architects, and as the architects vanish, the very foundation of marine life becomes unstable. We are witnessing a biological hemorrhage. The finning epidemic is not just a crisis of conservation. It is an assault on the continuity of life itself. We are stripping the evolutionary record of its most profound chapters, leaving behind a simplified, broken version of the seas. If the evolutionary journey of the shark was a marathon spanning 400 million years, the finning epidemic is a sprint toward a dead end, a race where the finish line is a silent, empty ocean. 2024, the North Atlantic. If the finning epidemic is a surgical strike against the shark's population, then climate change is a fundamental rewriting of the very chemistry of their world. We have spent centuries viewing the ocean as an infinite, unchanging expanse, a stable stage upon which the drama of evolution unfolds. But that stage is dissolving. As the atmosphere warms, the ocean acts as a massive heat sink, absorbing over 90% of the excess energy trapped by greenhouse gases. This thermal shift is not merely a change in temperature. It is a disruption of the ancient, predictable rhythms that sharks have used to navigate, hunt, and breed for millions of years. For a lineage defined by its ability to master diverse thermal niches, from the freezing polar waters to the tropical reefs, the speed of modern warming is an evolutionary shock. As currents shift and temperature gradients blur, the thermal highways that dictate shark migration are being rerouted. Species that evolved for the stability of the deep or the temperate shallows find themselves pushed into habitats that are either too warm to sustain their metabolic needs or too nutrient-poor to support their prey. We are witnessing a global, forced migration, where sharks are being driven into new territories not by choice, but by biological necessity. But the threat is not just thermal, it is chemical. As the ocean absorbs massive quantities of carbon dioxide, a silent and insidious process begins: ocean acidification. When CO2 dissolves in seawater, it reacts to form carbonic acid, lowering the pH of the ocean and fundamentally altering its molecular makeup. To the casual observer, a change in pH seems microscopic. To a cartilaginous organism, it is a catastrophic assault on the building blocks of life. The very essence of a shark is its skeleton, a masterpiece of lightweight, flexible cartilage. While sharks do not possess the calcium carbonate shells of mollusks or corals, they are far from immune to the shifting chemistry of the sea. Acidification alters the availability of ions necessary for various physiological processes, from the regulation of internal salt balances to the precise neurological functions required for sensory perception. Even more critical is the impact on the shark's food web. The base of the marine pyramid, the calcifying organisms like pteropods, corals, and certain plankton, is under direct siege. As these foundational species struggle to build their skeletons in an acidic environment, the entire energy supply of the ocean begins to flicker and dim. For an apex predator, the math is brutal. If the bottom of the food chain collapses due to chemical instability, the top cannot follow. The energy required to sustain a great white or a whale shark becomes increasingly difficult to find in a thinning, acidified ocean. We are no longer talking about a distant possibility. We are observing a real-time reconfiguration of the marine biosphere. The sharks, those ancient sentinels that have weathered 5 mass extinctions, are now facing a challenge unlike any other in their 400-million-year history. Previous extinctions were driven by sudden external shocks, asteroids, or volcanic eruptions. Today, the driver is the very breath of the planet itself, transformed into a corrosive force. The question is no longer just whether sharks can survive the hunt, but whether they can survive the very water they call home. 2024, the global abyss. History tells us that sharks are the ultimate survivors. They have outlived the dinosaurs, navigated the breakup of Pangaea, and endured the suffocating aftermath of the Great Dying. Their success is rooted in a biological resilience that spans hundreds of millions of years. But evolution is not a magic wand. It is a slow, grinding process of trial, error, and time. It is a mechanism that operates on the scale of millennia, not decades, and that is precisely where the danger lies. We are currently forcing the shark lineage into an evolutionary bottleneck, a narrow, suffocating passage where the number of surviving individuals is drastically reduced, and the genetic diversity required to adapt to change is stripped away. In a natural bottleneck, such as a sudden volcanic winter or a shifting tectonic plate, there is often a window of time for the species to recalibrate. But the Anthropocene is different. The rate of change we are imposing on the oceans is unprecedented in the fossil record. We are moving the goalposts of survival faster than the biological machinery of evolution can keep up. To understand the gravity of this, we must look at the life history of the shark itself. Many of the ocean's most iconic predators are K-strategists. They are built for stability, not speed. They grow slowly, reach sexual maturity late, and produce relatively few offspring. This strategy worked perfectly in a world of predictable seasonal shifts and stable ecosystems. It allowed them to become the refined, efficient masters of the sea. But in a world of rapid flux, this very stability becomes a liability. When a population is decimated by industrial fishing or pushed into new thermal zones by warming currents, the genetic toolkit of the species shrinks. A smaller population means fewer unique genetic variations. If a specific mutation allows a shark to better tolerate higher acidity or a different prey type, that mutation can only spread if there is a large, healthy population to carry it. By thinning the herds, we are effectively deleting the blueprints for future survival. We are narrowing their options until there is only one path left, and if that path leads to a dead end, there is no backup plan. This creates a terrifying feedback loop. As habitat loss and climate change fragment shark populations, these isolated groups become more vulnerable to inbreeding and localized extinction. We are seeing the specialists, those sharks that evolved for the perfect, narrow niche of a specific coral reef or a specific depth, vanishing first. What remains are the generalists, but even they are being pushed to their physiological limits. The shark is a masterpiece of biological engineering, a design so perfect it has remained largely unchanged for epochs. But perfection is not the same as flexibility. Evolution requires a buffer of time and a reservoir of genetic diversity. By compressing the timeline of environmental change and gutting the populations that hold the keys to adaptation, we are closing that buffer. We are tightening the neck of the bottle. The question that haunts marine biologists today is not whether sharks are strong enough to endure, but whether the clock of evolution can be outrun by the accelerating pace of human impact. Can a lineage that took 400 million years to perfect itself survive a crisis that has arrived in a heartbeat? 2024, the Great Barrier Reef. To witness the decline of a shark population is to witness the first tremor of a larger, more catastrophic earthquake. In the mining industry of the 19th century, workers would carry canaries into the dark, suffocating depths of coal mines. These small, sensitive birds acted as a biological early warning system. If the canary stopped singing or collapsed, it meant the air had become toxic, signaling a danger that human senses could not yet detect. If the miners acted quickly, they might survive. If they waited, they would perish alongside the bird. Today, the sharks of our oceans have become our modern canaries. They are not merely victims of environmental change, they are the ultimate indicators of its severity. Because sharks sit at the apex of the marine food web, they occupy a position of profound biological vulnerability. They are the final recipients of everything that happens in the layers below them. Every surge in ocean acidity, every shift in thermal currents, and every depletion of the microscopic plankton that fuels the entire oceanic engine eventually manifests in the health, the movement, and the numbers of the shark. When we observe a sudden shift in the migratory patterns of a blue shark, or a decline in the reproductive success of a reef shark, we are not just seeing the struggle of a single species. We are seeing the symptoms of a systemic failure. We are seeing the canary fall. The shark's role as a sentinel is rooted in their role as regulators. In a healthy ocean, sharks exert top-down control, keeping prey populations in check and ensuring that no single species dominates and collapses the delicate balance of the reef or the open sea. When shark numbers dwindle, this regulatory pressure vanishes. This triggers a trophic cascade, a domino effect where mid-level predators overpopulate, decimate the grazers, and eventually lead to the collapse of the very vegetation and structure that holds the ecosystem together. By the time the collapse is visible to the human eye, by the time the coral turns white or the fisheries go dry, the shark has already been signaling the disaster for years. This makes the shark a mirror, reflecting the hidden toxicity of our impact. Their physiology is a finely tuned instrument, sensitive to the slightest chemical and thermal deviations. When we see sharks struggling to find food, it tells us the middle of the food chain is fraying. When we see them moving into deeper, colder waters to escape rising surface temperatures, it tells us the tropical zones are becoming uninhabitable. When we see their growth rate slowing, it tells us the very chemistry of the water is working against the fundamental building blocks of life. We often make the mistake of viewing sharks through the lens of fear, as if they are the aggressors in the story of the ocean. But the truth is far more sobering. They are the observers. They are the silent witnesses to the shifting tides of a planet in crisis. To ignore the plight of the shark is to ignore the warning signs of the ocean itself. If the canary stops singing in the deep, it is not a sign that the predator has failed. It is a sign that the environment has become a tomb. And if the masters of the ocean cannot find a way to survive the air we are changing, then no species, no matter how resilient, is safe. 2024, the Great Barrier Reef. But if the canary has stopped singing, does that mean the song is lost forever? Or is it a final, desperate call for a change in the melody? The story of the shark has always been one of profound, ancient resilience. They have outlasted the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. They have navigated the shifting of tectonic plates and the freezing of the poles. Their blueprint is one of survival. Yet, the current crisis is unlike any they have faced in 400 million years. For the first time in their evolutionary history, the threat is not a meteor, a volcano, or a changing climate. It is a single, intelligent species. To protect the lineage, we must move beyond mere observation and into the era of active restoration. The path to resilience is being paved by a global, multi-fronted defense. In the halls of international governance, the battle is being fought with policy. The creation of large-scale marine protected areas, vast blue sanctuaries where fishing and extraction are strictly forbidden, is perhaps our most potent weapon. By carving out these no-take zones, we are giving sharks the one thing they need most to recover: space. Space to hunt, space to migrate, and most importantly, the sanctuary to breed without the shadow of a longline or a net. Simultaneously, the fight has moved into the realm of technology and science. We are now using satellite telemetry to track the invisible highways of the ocean, identifying blue corridors that connect disparate habitats. By understanding these migratory paths, conservationists can predict where sharks will be and protect them before they enter high-risk industrial zones. We are even seeing the rise of shark forensics. Using DNA sampling to track illegal fishing operations and hold global markets accountable for the trade of fins and meat. However, true resilience cannot be achieved through legislation alone. It requires a fundamental shift in the human psyche. We are witnessing a slow, tectonic movement in how the world perceives these predators. The era of the monster is being replaced by the era of the essential. Through education and media, the shark is being reimagined, not as a creature to be feared, but as a vital component of a living, breathing planet. The future of the lineage now hangs in a delicate balance between human greed and human stewardship. We are at a biological crossroads. One path leads to an ocean of silence, a graveyard of once mighty hunters, where the trophic cascades we feared become a permanent reality. The other path is one of reconciliation, a future where human industry exists in a managed equilibrium with the natural world. The sharks have survived 5 mass extinctions. They have proven, time and again, that they possess the biological tenacity to endure. They have the tools to survive. They have the instinct to adapt. The question is no longer whether the shark can survive the changing world. The question is whether we can change our world enough to let them. The canary is still singing, but the song is growing faint. The path to resilience is open, but the window of opportunity is closing. The future of the ocean, and ultimately our own, depends on whether we choose to listen.